We're going to get started. Thanks for showing up tonight again. DriveIT. I think everybody knows who I am. But for the people streaming and on the videos and stuff later, I'm Eric Wise. I'm the CEO, co-founder of DriveIT. And every month we do these Minding Your Own Business series where we have a business person or some kind of thought leader come in and talk about whatever they want to talk about. So like last month we did a thing on IoT. We've done things on blockchain and various in-demand topics. So today I wanted to do something on effective technical interviewing processes. And the first question is like, well, why me? And what a lot of people out in the internet land don't know is that I founded one of the first coding boot camps in the world. It was actually the first one in Ohio. It was the first Java and .NET boot camp in the world. And over the 5 years of growing and running that business, we actually ended up with over 300 employers in our employer network. So I had all these students that were interviewing with all these employers, and then I had all these employers that wanted to attract the best students. So I got to look at like everybody's hiring processes, everybody's questions, because the students would come back and they'd talk about the interviews and what they got asked and how the interview went. And it really gave me a lot of visibility into how people do things. So I've had this in the back of my brain for a while, and it's something I wanted to give back because there's some things I've noticed and some things I've come to learn from working with candidates and working with companies and helping them attract and recruit candidates. So the first thing I wanted to do is start with a lie. That's the best way to start any presentation, is with a lie. And the lie is we only hire the best. We want to hire the best. But you can't really say you only hire the best. And the reason I say this is because my experience with 300 employers is that there were at least 70 different interview processes. So there is no way that anybody here can really say they're hiring the best, because if there was a prescription for hiring the best, everybody would have the same hiring process. So what you want to do, and the other thing about hiring the best is, I'm like, hey, who are the best? Is it the top 10% of candidates? You're not interviewing the top 10% of candidates every time you open a position. Those people have jobs, they're working, they may or may not apply. I mean, your candidate pool at any given time is going to have good people, bad people, mediocre people. So, what you're really trying to do is do the best you can with the best fit you can. And there's really no A/B process testing for hiring. So if I choose to hire candidate A over candidate B, there's no way later for me to say, would candidate B have been better? There's no way to know. It's like a quantum situation there. So when we talk about hiring, what we really want to do is figure out whether our process performed well enough that we're satisfied with the hire, that hire made our company, made our team better than it was before. That's really the only objective measure you can have for any hiring process. Now this is where I like to ask a question. So I'm assuming everybody in here has been involved in a hiring process. So put your hands up if you have. All right, everybody. Now keep them up. Put your hand down if you've ever been trained on how to interview somebody. Yes. So about half the room still has their hand up. And that's something that's always been very perplexing to me, is that, every organization knows that people are the lifeblood of your organization, and getting the right candidate is so important. But very few organizations actually spend the time to train the people doing the hiring on how to interview, how to evaluate, how to take notes, how to design that hiring process, and how to measure it. So, I make the statement most good hires are accidental because a lot of it's gut feel, because you don't have that process. And with gut feel, the thing you fall into, the trap you fall into, is that we like people similar to us. Even when the role isn't for us. I mean, I'm a tech guy. I hate data migrations. I would rather spike my eyes out than have to go through and clean up data and transfer data from system A to system B. I think it is boring. I think it is repetitive. if I'm hiring for that role, I don't want to hire somebody like me, but I like people like me. So you need to recognize that, you need to resist it, and that's part of training your interviewers. You need to train people on things like bias. Everybody has bias. Everyone. Doesn't matter. We notice in the even in the IT field, we're always talking about diversity, we're talking about women in IT. There is definite bias. It's been measured, it's out there. Minimizing bias requires education. It requires constant effort. It requires evaluation. And we don't do a lot of that stuff. We tend to overweight credentials. Some companies are worse about this than others, but we pay a lot of attention to what college you went to. I graduated from college 15 years ago. I mean, is anything I learned in college really relevant to my job today? Some of it, some of the foundational stuff. But none of the tool sets or languages or anything I'm working with existed when I was in college. So unless I'm like a new grad, who cares? And if you're familiar with Google, the head HR person of Google, he actually came out and say that Google's stats, their internal hiring stats, they actually measure and keep data on stuff. Where you went to college has no correlation on how good of an employee you are. None. It's a good measure of somebody will finish what they started, but other than that, no correlation. So it doesn't matter. We overweight certifications. A lot of technical certifications are multiple choice questions. I have never been writing code and had my editor pop up a multiple choice question of what would you like to do next? That's not how it works. And frankly, I've showed people this before. There are sites out there that for any certification, Microsoft, Cisco, whatever, you can download the test bank. And if you can memorize 140 questions and answer, you can ace any Microsoft test, you can ace any Cisco test. Not really relevant certifications. Flashy company names, do I really care if you work for Google? No, I care if you're going to improve my company. Do I care if you work for Microsoft? No, I don't. But some people, are inspired by that. But that's another bias, Just because candidate A worked for Microsoft and candidate B, worked for Connexus, doesn't mean that candidate A is better than candidate B. No correlation. And then, of course, we got the untrained interviewers that I already mentioned. If you're not training your interviewers and you're not evaluating your interviewers. So let me ask you to raise your hand if you say yes to this question. How many of you within your hiring process come back 6 months to 12 months later, look at how that candidate did on their review, and tie that back to who interviewed them? 2, 3. So, a quarter of the room is doing that. How do you know that somebody's a good interviewer if you don't actually look at the long-term performance of the people that they recommended and then use that to coach your interviewers or evaluate your process? You can't do that. And ultimately, when I talk to companies about hiring, they talk to me about steps. They don't talk to me about process. Because a good process is actually measurable. That's how we differentiate between steps and processes. And if you're going to have a good hiring process, it has to maximize predictability. So what do I mean by that? I mean that measuring that your hiring process produces candidates and hires that go on to perform well in your company. You have to look at that entire sequence versus the actual performance of the employee. And if you dig into that, you might see that, a certain team that's interviewing, their people perform poorly. They have a high attrition rate. They have a low performance rate. There's something wrong with the hiring process there. The candidates might have some problems too, but the hiring process is supposed to suss that out. It's supposed to be predictable. If we follow these steps, we will get good candidates. The second thing a good hiring process should do is minimize loss. So and when I talk about minimizing loss, that means that if you have a good candidate that enters your funnel, how many of those good candidates get to the offer stage versus dropping out? Oh, I'm sorry, I got another job because I'm in IT and it's really high in demand, and you take 6 weeks to make an offer to somebody. You can do that if you're Google, and that's kind of the other bad news I got for a lot of companies. Some companies think they're Google and they're not, and even Google isn't Google. So minimizing that loss, identifying early on, I have a good feeling about this candidate. A lot of people don't rate candidates until they come in for the interview, but you should be rating candidates on the potential of when you become aware of them, when they enter the funnel. I got a good feeling about this candidate. Let's track that. How many of them actually make it to the offer stage? And the last part is maximizing acceptance. Okay, we went through the whole process. We've invested time now. We've invested money now. We're going to make them an offer. How many offers extended are actually accepted? And a lot of times when I'm talking to companies, the HR person might know about the funnel. They know how many applicants they get. They know how many they interviewed. They know how many accepted or rejected that offer. The people that are on the tech team or in other teams doing the interviews, they have no idea. They have no idea. And I tend to think, that this maximizing acceptance, if you have a good hiring process and you get to the point where you make an offer, you should be batting about 75%. People should be taking those offers because you should have qualified them, you should have sold them. And we'll get into how we do that. So let's start with maximizing predictability. So there's a few principles around doing this. Garbage in, garbage out. So we love IT. Garbage in, garbage out is something we do. And what this means is that you're willing as an organization to prepare, conduct, and debrief in an effective, consistent way. Consistency is the key. So this takes organizational buy-in. You have to be willing to take the time to craft an interview process that ensures that those chosen to move on through the process and those people on your side that are executing the process do it consistently every time. The hiring process is more like a factory process than it is an artistic, creative process. This also means that you need to be willing to fire your interviewers. There are people in your organization that don't have good rapport with strangers, that don't present themselves very well, that don't sell your company very well, that intimidate candidates. You do not want those people in your hiring process. That's part of the measurement part. If you notice in that measuring loss that when people get to a certain interviewer, they drop out of the process, that is a problem. That's not a good thing. Some people pride themselves, especially in IT. I see this. You have some people pride that I am the toughest interviewer in my company. Okay, so you're proud of making people fail? That's probably not the face that we want to extend to our candidates. That's not good. So at the end of any interview, what you really need is a clear sense of whether that candidate improves your organization. This is something a lot of interviewers miss out on. I'll talk to people. We'd have our hiring days and stuff at the Guild, and I'd be following up with hiring managers, and I'd say, hey, how did they do at their interview? And they'd be like, well, they did okay. Well, you need to do this. Everybody on your interviewing team that meets with that candidate needs to be a clear yes or a clear no, and more importantly, they need to be able to articulate why. It's not based on a feeling. It is based on measurements, and that's what we're going to get into these measurements. But you have to be able to articulate why you're voting up or down. Because if you just sat with a candidate for 30 minutes and you get done with them and you can't articulate why you feel the way you do, you wasted their time, you wasted your time, you wasted the company time. And that's just a bad look. So the first thing I tell my interviewing people when I've trained my team is that notes aren't optional. You will take notes during the interview. Not only will you take notes, you will take copious notes so that you can actually make citations. Yes, I want to hire this person. Here's why. They said this. They could do this. They said that. Oh, and then the other viewer can say, oh, well, I didn't get that read because they said this, that, or the other thing. So for one thing, you can suss out the consistency of the candidate. For another thing, you can defend your position. And finally, when we were talking about bias, how many of you are familiar with something called recency bias? taking copious notes will reduce recency bias. So I'm an interviewer. What's my ideal hire? There's only 3 things we care about. Ultimately, we boil down everything in a company. They're smart, they get things done, and they have the functional skills needed for the roles. Notice I said functional skills, I didn't say exact match. That's another thing. A lot of companies, especially in this environment, we have a very competitive hiring environment. Unemployment is very low. You can't look for a unicorn. Have you guys ever heard the term unicorn? I want somebody, JavaScript, 3 years of experience, 5 years experience with this thing, 10 years of experience with this thing, that also speaks German. And it's like, okay, you got to break it down to like functional skills. If you're looking for a coding position, can they code? Can they code in a language that is similar to the language you want? Sometimes you need to go there. Sometimes, you got a Java position, you need to hire a C# person. That's okay. They'll learn Java. If they're smart and they get things done, they will learn on the job the skills that they need to do. And again, when you're being very clear and open with the candidate and stuff, they know that they don't know your entire stack, and you can set expectations for how that process looks, how you're going to onboard them. And then at the end of that onboarding, if they're not meeting your expectations, you can start over. But you got to be confident, down here in these functional skills. If they're 80% of the way there and they're smart and they get things done, that's a hire in my book. So, resumes. We love resumes, right? How many of you read the resume before you meet the candidate? Almost everybody. Good. Now, every evaluation does start with that resume. Does the resume matter? Do we really care? Or is the resume just a puff piece that the candidate just tries to brag about themselves and make things up? Do we really care about the resume? I'm going to say yes. I believe that the resume is vitally important because it's a tool for questions. When I'm going through somebody's resume, and this is part of training your IT people, especially your non-HR people, that resume is a tool for figuring out what the candidate actually did versus what they observed. Because we will always favor what they really did versus what they participated in. And some of the ways you can do that is look at comparisons or percentages. If a candidate says, I improved a process by 15%, okay, how did you do that? What was the old process like? What was the meetings like? How did you plan that out? How did you execute that? You should be drawing those things. When you're going through somebody's resume before an interview, you should be writing down questions to probe deeper about those percentages. And you'll find that people that didn't actually participate, that didn't actually do things, they were just kind of in the room, they're very shallow. They can't explain the hows and whys. And that gets you right to the bottom of it. One of my favorite questions, especially when they make comparisons or percentages, like I improved X by Y, I got a whiteboard in my office. And I say, whiteboard me out what the old process looked like, and then whiteboard out what the new process looked like for me. I mean, within bounds of protecting your IP and things like that. But just give me a high-level overview of what that world looked like. And they should be able to map that out. Who are the stakeholders? What's going on? Especially at a senior level. One of the other things is tell me about some challenges in the implementation. What kind of problems did you run into? Who did you need to solve it? Did you guys solve it internally, or did you need to get buy-in from another team? What was that like? How were those communication challenges? Did you have anybody you had to work with that was difficult to work with or wasn't available? How did you deal with that? And you'll get a very clear look about whether they were managing the process or just taking orders. And it's okay if they're just taking orders. If it's a lower level position, that's fine. That's what you're looking for. Ask them to highlight their main contribution. What was your main contribution on the project? What's the thing you were most proud of? And then on top of that, for their project work that they've done, try to tease out how important that project was in their existing company. Because a company typically will not put their C-list players on an important project. So if I'm interviewing somebody from Progressive Insurance and they work on the policy or rating or compliance engine, I have a feeling that they're competent and important because those things are critical to Progressive's business. Versus somebody, again using Progressive, versus somebody who said, yeah, I worked on their bug tracking system. Yeah, that's an ancillary help desk thing. That system could probably, that server could catch on fire and the business would just keep on running and nobody would be all that panicked about it. So that's another way to kind of tease out, how did they perform at their last company? What were their responsibilities? How important were those responsibilities? Did you see advancement, at the other company? So write down all those questions before the interview. I used to, my team, when I would train them to do interviews, I would actually look at their questions before they were allowed to interview the candidate. Nobody on my team that was participating in interviews, I'd say, okay, you got the resume? Yeah, okay, show me 3-4 questions you're gonna ask them. Because I wanted to see that because I wanted to know they did their homework. So when you're drilling into those things, I already kind of went through this. Probe. So give me an example of digging, who, what, where, when, why, how. Give me the details. Differentiate. Pay attention to their language. A lot of people don't do this. Are they saying we or are they saying I? Because we is a participant, I is an owner. Exposure versus expertise. Do you actually understand this technology or did you just kind of work with it because it was there? How deeply do you know this tool? Participant versus ownership. And then of course the worst question you can ask is walk me through your resume. If you have a good candidate, a top tier candidate, and you ask them this question, you have just told them that your time is more important than theirs, that you are not prepared for this interview, and that you don't really care as a company. That is literally the worst question you should ask. It's disrespectful. Younger candidates won't pick up on that. More experienced candidates will. So you've gone through the resume. That's a lot of HR stuff. Sometimes tech people go through the resume with people as well. But then you get to the technical interview. And this is where it gets fun. We're going to set the bar. So tech interview. First rule of technical interview questions. Never ask questions you have never asked before. Ever. You need to know before an interview whether that technical question is the appropriate difficulty level, whether that question is clear, and if somebody is struggling with understanding what you're getting at, what are the appropriate things to guide them towards the discussion that you would like to have with them. So you need to try out every one of your interview questions on your coworkers, on your people already on your team. The interview is not a place for the tech person to get creative or try to be smart or whatever. Don't do that. The second rule of technical questions is you got to be able to identify what's very good, good, poor, or very poor, and why. So this is something a lot of people don't do. They ask yes/no questions, single answer things. That is horrible. It's not going to help you tease out good candidates from bad. And it also, the nice thing with this is it gives you a spectrum for every candidate. You can use the same questions for junior people as you do for mid-level and senior people. Because if I'm interviewing a junior person, I might accept a poor or good answer. The more senior they are, the better I expect that answer to be. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Here's a contrived example. I'm going to hire a sandwich artist. So I'm going to ask them, tell me about the process of crafting a delicious sandwich. That's my interview question. Tell me about that. Notice that it's open-ended. It's not yes or no. It's not quick. It's not contrived. Tell me about this. Delicious sandwich. Very poor? They don't even know what the basic components of a sandwich are. Like, they have no idea what I'm talking about. That's a very poor answer. That might even be disqualifying. We might be done right there, if you don't know that. Poor answer. You gave me a textbook answer. Here's what the dictionary says a delicious sandwich is, but there's no, I can't give you any metaphors. I can't go into detail about sandwiches. I just know that, Yeah, you know, a sandwich is something that has ingredients between 2 slices of bread. And then they're done. You know, they shut up. And you're like, anything more? Yeah. All right. That's a poor answer. A good answer is, yeah, not only do I know what makes a delicious sandwich, but I actually understand how they're assembled. And here's some examples in my work of how I have crafted, you know, delicious sandwiches previously. And now we can start having a conversation about their experience, because now they're going into detail. Oh, so you like salami versus ham. Why is that? Oh, well, you know, the customer at that point, you know, and they start going into examples about their work and their project. That's a good answer. A very good answer to me is not only do they do everything in the good, but they understand at a conceptual level why those components make a good sandwich and how it affects the stakeholders and how it affects the strategy of their company. Now we're talking architecture, senior level stuff here. This is somebody who understands the world. This is somebody I can probably put in front of my customers, I can put in front of my stakeholders, because you'll hear them start describing things, but they describe them not from, here's what I was doing at the computer. They start describing them from, yes, I was doing that computer, but here's how it impacted my world. Here's how it impacted my company. That is like the surest sign of having a senior level person, a leader in your organization, is that you hear them talk about other people while they're doing that. So very cool. Do try to create one-of-a-kind questions. Do not go out to Google and say, SQL Server interview questions, and pull your questions off that list. Do not do that. Your candidates have Google. You're not interviewing somebody because they can regurgitate, right? We want thinkers, we want smart people, we want doers. So regurgitation, yeah. We're not interviewing for toy problems. This drove me away from a company back in the day. They were a business writing standard business software. And I sat down and they're like, write me some code to balance a binary tree. And I said, you write a lot of your own data structures around here? No. All right. So you're wasting my time. You're giving me a sample problem that is not indicative to your environment. I mean, if you don't do that, then why do you care if I can do that? What are you proving? They're proving that that question makes them feel smart, because for people that aren't fresh out of computer science, that's a difficult problem. So your questions should always be relevant to what you want your candidates to do within your company. And then next we have the big question, and there's a lot of debate about this online, a lot of debate about this in LinkedIn. Should we do a hands-on assessment? Should we make them write code? If we're hiring a technical person, should we make them write code? Should we make them access a database, write queries? Should we, if they're in DevOps, should we make them write a script? Yeah. If the role requires implementation skills, then yeah, you should absolutely ask them to do it. Would you hire a wedding band without a demo tape? No. Would you hire a painter if you've never seen any of their work? No. So yes, you should ask them to do a hands-on assessment. But here's where we here's where we get off the rails. Those assessments should always be relevant to the job. If you're hiring a web developer, then your assessment better be something to do with web development, or you are wasting their time and you're not learning anything about the skills that are important to your job. So don't do that. If it's an in-person assessment, it shouldn't take more than an hour. And I always recommend that you give them the tools that they will use on the job for that assessment. So when I used to do coding assessments in person, I would give them a laptop. It had an internet connection. It had all the tools installed, and I would ask them to do a short sample program. In my case, I was hiring database developers, so I'd always make them connect to a database, update some data, following some rules. Because you would be surprised, a lot of people don't realize, you would be surprised that the delta between a technical person that is competent and a technical person that is not is huge. Bad technical people cannot solve simple problems. You do not have to be super complicated or clever in your assessments. Some people like to send people home with assessments. That's okay. You do have to interview them again, because then you have to check to make sure that they're the ones that actually wrote the code. I think it's very risky to send somebody home with an assessment, But if you do that, it needs to take less than 2 hours. Because we're in a full employment environment. You are asking somebody with a job and a family to spend more than 2 hours writing code for your company, you better be Google. Because nobody's going to do that if you're not Google. That will turn a candidate off immediately. So let's talk about some of these representative quick problems. Some people like to show code samples. So I'm going to show you a block of code. I'm going to show you a representative table. I'm going to show you some BI stuff. And I want to talk to you about it. I want to see your thoughts about it. A lot of times what I like to do is I like to get some very ugly stuff that is not standard and ask them how they would improve it. That is a nice open-ended question. It gives you insight into how they think. It gives you insight into whether they understand what they're looking at, because they can't fake that. So I'll show you a code sample that does one thing, and I'll say, I want to change this code sample to do this instead. What would you do? How would you approach that problem? Talk to me about your thought process. Show them sloppy code. How would you refactor this? How would you make it prettier? Representative take-home problems, provide a DLL, provide a web API, and have them write something to interact with it. Give them a data file. Ask them to write a script to clean it up. It's a data file, it's got typos, it's got errors, it's not consistently formatted. Write me a script to clean this data up. When they come in and bring that project back, have like 3 different solutions of that project, and then show them a different one that's different from what they did, what they provided you. And ask them to compare and contrast the pros and cons of your solution versus their solution. Which one do you like better? Why? You can really dig in with these open-ended questions, and you can really dig into who they are, how they think, how they roll. But the main thing to remember with the Googling is that standard questions are not useful ever. Do not ask definitional questions in an interview. It is a waste of your time. These are all services online that everybody has access to that do nothing but take the most common technical interview questions and spew them out at you with the answers. So if you are asking common definitional questions and your candidate is even remotely aware of the internet, they will have studied those. What is inheritance? Come on, it's on page 2 of Rockin' the C# Interview. There's a whole book, Rockin' the C# Interview, that walks you through every single algorithm, script, definitional challenge that you would have out there. So always try to make questions more broad about the environment, about your code, about how you're solving problems, about how you attack things. That is going to give you a much better read on who that candidate is, how they think, and whether they do think. So the next part is you got your hiring team. And this is where your predictability lives or dies. Your hiring team. You are only as good as your team. So just like you qualify your candidates, you better qualify your interviewers. Your interviewers need to be trained, they need to be reviewed, and they need to be measured. Volunteering to be a technical interviewer on your team is a responsibility in addition to your normal workload. You need to make that clear to them. It's not only an additional responsibility, but it's vitally important to the future of the company. And it's actually one way I used to self-select my leaders. The ones that wanted to interview, that wanted to be involved in building the team, and were effective at doing it, boy, that's got leadership potential written all over it. That is an easy way to suss out leaders in your organization, is throw them into that interview process. But do note the word team. Hiring decisions have to be made as a group. But the most emphasis needs to be with the people that are working closely with the candidate. If I've got thumbs up from 3/4 of the people and thumbs down from an executive who isn't working with them, I'm going to go with the people that have to work with that person. I have had candidates go through my interview process where I've had people give the thumbs up, but then with the caveat, but only if they're on somebody else's team. That particular person, very smart, but they were a jerk. They were abrupt, they were rude, they culturally were not a good fit. So, you suss that out. And the people that would have, so the people that wouldn't have worked with them, They were like, yeah, that person's super smart, they're great. But then the people that would work closely with them were like, yeah, this person seems like a real jerk and I don't want to hang out with them. So I rejected him because the people working closest with them said no. And that's important not only for protecting them, but it also protects your culture. It protects the morale of the people that are closest to you. Because the worst thing you can do is say, hey, you're going to have to work with Joe. You don't want to work with Joe, but I'm going to make you do it anyway. That's not a good look. On the other side, being a skilled, organized interviewer, that reflects very well on your company because that candidate is evaluating you at the same time you're evaluating them. But as a group, as a team, they should be the ones crafting the questions and the processes that are realistic to the role. So when I laid out that sandwich artist thing with very poor to good, that is the technical team that is involved in the hiring process. They should sit down and they should have a bank of 20 or 30 of those questions with notes about what makes good answers or bad answers. And then if you have that person interviewing with 3 or 4 people, before you interview with them, the team just says, yeah, I'm going to ask them question 1, 5, and 10. Oh, I'm going to do 2, 4, and 8. I'm going to do these ones. So then you won't have repeats because candidates don't like to repeat themselves. That's a waste of their time. And it also lets you kind of get that broader feel without making the candidate feel like they're being fired upon. Because a lot of times companies will have one technical interviewer that just goes really technical. And then by then they come out of the interview and the candidate just feels beat up, right? So let each interviewer ask like 3 or 4 questions. If they're good questions, it'd be good enough. 3 or 4 questions, and then talk to them about them. And then pass them on to the next person. 3 or 4 questions. Space it out. Make it a little more welcoming. And please track the success of the candidates back to the interviewer and give feedback. Because if you're going to be involved in that hiring process, you need to regularly report back to them. Here's the people you gave thumbs up on. Here's how strong you were. I gave them a number scale, so they'd rate them 1 to 10. And I'm like, hey, you rated these people an 8, and they didn't work out. Okay, so what are you seeing versus this other person that's giving them 4s? Why do we have a different there? Anytime I get excited in my hiring process when I have one person that says they're an 8 and one person says they're a 4. Because now we can have a discussion. Because we may have misalignment in our hiring process. This person thinks they're an 8 for these reasons. This person thinks they're a 4 for these reasons. But come to find out, these reasons aren't important to the success of the role. So we need to change our evaluation process. That's a good way to suss it out, is getting that back together. You guys have any questions about predictability? That was predictability. If you do all those things, have all those questions, have all those processes, have all that feedback, over time, your candidate pool will be very predictable, and the people that you recommend to hire will do very well in your organization, barring, acts of nature or somebody's life falling apart. Can't help you if somebody gets a divorce after they get hired and they just go to pieces. That just happens. But we want that trend analysis. We want that data. And you will also find out in your organization then which teams are exceptional at interviewing and which ones aren't. And you can fix that. You can have them work together. You can have them mentor each other. You can build that up, and that makes your team stronger. So minimizing loss, you want to keep those good candidates engaged. The main rule of minimizing loss is telling candidates who you are. Every touch or non-touch tells the candidate who you are. When they email you, do you get back to them? Do you get back to them quickly? Do you make them wait 3 days? That's telling them something. It's telling them you're too busy. It's telling them they're not important. It's telling them you got other things to do. If you've identified them as a good candidate, everybody who touches that candidate needs to be aware that you think this is going to be a good candidate, and they need to treat them like a customer. You don't have to kiss up to them, but treat them with respect and have respect for their time. And the main thing is that communication drives engagement. If you want somebody to be engaged in your hiring process, especially if your hiring process is longer, if your process takes more than like a week to make a decision, you should create a plan to create engagement with the candidate. So, high demand, competitive hiring environment, your communication plan needs to be on point. And it starts with just responding swiftly and politely to any inquiry. Nobody should wait for more than a day to hear back from you, period. This also includes releasing people from consideration. A lot of companies do not do that. You just never hear from them again. You don't have to tell them why. I know the lawyers don't like that. You don't have to tell them why. But there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, so-and-so, thank you for applying. We went with another candidate. We'll consider it in the future. That's all they need to know. And they appreciate it, and they talk about it. I have heard candidates talking about it, that this company treated me with respect. Even though they didn't come with me now, they treated me with respect. And especially with junior level candidates, you may want them to come back in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. You don't want to leave somebody with a bad taste in their mouth. So always do this. It doesn't hurt anybody, and from the candidate's perspective, I mean, it's like being ghosted by a girl. I mean, you don't want to do that to somebody. That's mean. Just let me know you don't want to go out on another date, and then I'll stop worrying about it and I'll find somebody else. It's okay. Be upfront about the process and the timing. A lot of companies skip this. Right away, upon qualification, your first interaction with this employee, here's what you should expect of our hiring process, and here's how long it usually takes. Because then the candidate knows, if I really want to go work for company X, and it takes 3 to 4 weeks to get an offer from them, I might hold off on submitting my resume to a couple other faster companies for a week or two, because I want everything to hit at the same time so that I have a lot of information. Candidates are trying to balance their time and balance all these interviews and make a decision with good information. So the more you give them up front to give them those expectations, the better they can plan, and the more highly they'll think of you, because then company A, I know what to expect. I don't know what company B is even doing. That puts you ahead of the game. Mind the gaps. If it is a good candidate, you should not go more than 3 days without communicating with them. Take a page from drip marketing. You guys familiar with drip marketing? You sign up for something, you hit a website, and then like 3 days later they'll send you an email with some information or a helpful blog post or something like that. And then 3 days later they'll send you an email with a helpful blog post or something like that. There is nothing wrong. Somebody's applying at your company because they're interested in your company. There is nothing wrong with setting a policy like, hey, every 3 days, because we got a 4-week hiring process, we're going to send them some information about our company. Here's something about our culture. Here's some charitable events we do. Here's what we did at our summer picnic. Here's what's going on in the industry. Here's a new product we just did. Here's industry news. There's nothing wrong. They've heard from it. Hey, hi, hope everything's going well. We're still going through our process. Here's some information, some more information about our company. You can segment that stuff up and you can keep them engaged because it shows them that you're thinking about them. And I like to use the dating metaphor a lot. If I take a girl out to dinner and then she doesn't hear from me for 4 weeks until I want to ask her to marry me, no, I got to woo her. I got to keep in contact with her. I got to send her some text messages. Got to send her some emails. I got to show her that I am interested in keeping her engaged. That is a very good message to give your candidates. And again, it puts you ahead of other companies because a lot of companies don't do that. And the main reason for doing all this stuff is that your time is precious. This is something a lot of companies fail at, and it's all the software industry's fault because all these HR companies, software companies are selling you these applicant tracking systems. All right? And look, I'm not telling you not to use the applicant tracking system, but are we or are we not in a full employment situation? We're very close to full employment. The unemployment rate for DBAs right now in Northeast Ohio is 0.1%. So if you are hiring a DBA, you are hiring somebody who already has a job 9 times out of 10, even more, 99 times out of 100. 99.9 times out of 100. Now I'm doing the math. But you are hiring somebody who already has a job. So when somebody already has a job and they're in a field like IT and they're already making good money, make it easy for them to impulse apply. You want to catch that candidate. They came home from work on a Friday. They had a bad week. Their boss pissed them off. And they're like, I am ready for a change. I am pissed off. It's time. I'm done with this. I want a new job. How easy is it for them to apply to your company? Because I'll tell you right now, if they're pissed off and they go to you and they see that your company has a job open and they're like, you know what, I'm going to apply for this. I'm going to click that apply button. I'll show these guys. I bet I can find a better deal. I'm a valuable asset. And then they click the button, and the first thing they have to do is take their resume and re-record it into an online application that's going to take them 45 minutes to an hour. 10 minutes into that, they're not going to be angry at their company anymore. And they're going to be like, yeah, you know what? My job isn't that bad. I'm just going to click close on that. I'll just go back to work. I just need to calm down. You should make it really easy to get into the funnel. Really easy. Nobody that sells a product makes it difficult to buy their product. You shouldn't do that with your applicants either. Because the nice thing about the applicant tracking systems is you can consume those resumes all day long, make it easy, and then come up with an efficient process to filter the bad ones out. You don't need to make it difficult to apply. Don't do that. You gonna ask somebody to come in? Good, you should. One day, one and done. If you have an interview process and you have an interview team that's on point and you have your questions and you have your tech thing, one and done. Again, they're employed. You are asking them to take PTO to interview at your company. You cannot ask them to come back 2, 3, 4 times. It's disrespectful. I have heard candidates say, my gosh, I'm going to have to take 3 days off work. They're already not respecting my time and I don't even work there yet. What's it going to be like when I actually take the job? So again, every touch tells them who you are. And if you have a process, every meeting is going to be efficient. Every interviewer is going to be on point. They're going to feel that. They're going to feel that you have your stuff together. They're going to feel that you know exactly what you're looking for. And on top of that, you're not going to repeat yourself. There's nothing worse for a candidate than going into a room with different interview people and having the same conversation over and over for half a day. You don't need to do that. Don't repeat yourself. But if you're going to do that, not repeat yourself, you need to have a process and everybody needs to know where they are in the process. And your team should have met beforehand and divvied up what they're going to talk about. And the other thing about that is you'll find that some interviewers specialize in certain parts of the interview. So some people will be really good at parts and they'll kind of self-select into those parts of your process, which is good because then you get specialized and your process gets even stronger. So last thing, maximizing acceptance, you got to close that sale. Notice the word sale. If they are a strong candidate, remember the first lie that we told. We only hire the best. If they're a strong candidate, if they're the best, you better sell them. Because the best can work wherever they want. They don't have to work for you. They already have a job. There's a dozen other if you want to hire them, there's a dozen other companies that will hire them. That is just the reality of the situation. And you need to accept that. Every interviewer in your process needs to know how to sell your company. Every single one. Do not wait for the process to finish. So it's that first date principle. One of the worst things you can tell a candidate at the end of the process is, hey, you did really good, but we're early in our process and we need to finish interviewing. I go back to the dating example. Hey girl, I had a great time tonight, but I think I want to go steady with you, but I really want to play the field for like 4 more weeks, and then I'll get back to you and let you know if we should go steady. No. If you get to the end of the interview process, even if it's the first candidate, and you have this process in place and everybody goes, then hire them. Be done. Get the offer out. Be finished. Don't wait. Because a lot of times what happens with those candidates is they think that you're just being nice to them. Oh yeah, they say I did really good, but they have to interview all these other people, so I must not have done that good because they don't want to hire me right now. But that comes from, because the reason people wait like that, the reason people do that, is because they don't have a hiring process that they have faith in. If your process is predictable and it produces good candidates, if everybody goes like this, make the offer. You're done. Which also makes it more efficient, which makes it cheaper to hire people, because now you don't have to interview these other 10 candidates. You're done. It's great. That's a good problem to have. But every interviewer needs to know how to sell your company. That means they need to understand the potential of your product, the potential of your company, and they need to know what key initiatives are going on in your company. Every interviewer should be able to describe what's going on in your company, what they're excited about, what makes them come to work. You need to interview your interviewers, because if they can't articulate this, they are not ready to interview candidates for you. Because the candidate is going to pick up on that lack of knowledge, and they're going to see that as lack of excitement, they're going to see that as lack of engagement, and they're going to run. They're going to run away from your company. Every interviewer should know about the challenges and opportunities. Why does this position even exist? Not, why does it exist? Did somebody quit and we're filling it? Is this a new role? Who cares? You should know that, but that's not important. Why is this position important to our team? If you're selling somebody, they're coming in to provide value. They want to feel good about themselves. So you need to be able to articulate, this position is important. Like JD runs a small company. He's hiring. I'm hiring because we're growing and I need help. I need more people because we have such potential in this product and our customer base is growing and we need to modernize our stack because our customers are demanding it. Mobile is a thing. Data science is a thing. We need to do these things as a company and I need your help to do it. That is a powerful selling tool to the right person, to an engaged technical professional. How does your team manage their work? Are they collaborative? Do things come from top down? You know, you need to be able to describe, like, when you're in here, what is it going to be like? How do we do our life? What is a day in my life? Because as a candidate, you know, when you break out those questions and you give everybody just 3 of them, like, boom, I asked my 3 technical questions. That's like 10 minutes of my 30 minutes. And now the rest of the time, I want to tell you about my team. I want to tell you about how we work. Let's have a conversation about that. Is this a good fit for you? How do you like to work? How do you feel respected in your organization? What do you like? What do you not like? Let's build rapport. Because also the more rapport you build, the more they're going to want to come work for you if you have positive rapport. And alternatively, you may find out in that rapport building, like, oh, we don't have rapport. You know? How do their strengths play into your needs as a team? Tie their motivations to you and your goals. What are you motivated by? What do you like about your current job? What do you like about tech? What made you get into tech? Oh, I like playing with technology. I like playing with new stuff. Oh boy, our team, we're embarking on the, you know, we're doing AngularJS now, which is a brand new thing. This is really exciting for us. You know, good. Tie that to them. Or, oh, you know, I really like stability. I like, you know, I like to come in, do a good day's work, and just know what I'm going to be doing. Okay, yeah, we got this maintenance role. I mean, that's perfect for you, you know? I mean, everybody has different needs. Everybody has different goals. Tie their motivations to your team's goals. And if there's not a match there, be upfront about it and be done, right? And I already talked about that. If you have agreement, just make the offer. Your process works. Either you believe in your process or you don't. So one of the things I like to ask every candidate somewhere in the hiring process is, what 3 things would you change? So you're in your current job. What are the 3 things, if somebody handed you the God scepter, what 3 things would you change in your company, in your team, in your process? What would you change? This is great because if they say something like, oh, well, you know, my company is very bureaucratic and I would want things to move faster, and you're a small, nimble company, oh, now you have something to sell them with. Now you have something to sell them with. And then when you close this candidate, echo this back. The person who gives them the offer should be able to echo that back. You get them on the phone. You're like, hey, Joe, you know, we're happy. We're gonna extend you an offer. And here's why we're going to extend you an offer. Yeah, you did well on the technical interview stuff, but we heard you when you said you don't like bureaucracy. And what we told you and the type of organization we are, We're very nimble, we're very agile, we have self-organizing teams. We feel like your goal of reducing bureaucracy fits very well with our company. And if you can take some of those things that they say and echo it back and show how your company matches those goals, you create something in their brain that for them to reject your offer requires cognitive dissonance. And that is very uncomfortable for people. So that's how you really close a deal, is you use their own words and you use their own desires. It shows you were listening, you echo it back. You better be truthful about that matching your company. But if you've got those things in alignment and you echo it when you present the offer, your close rate is going to go way up. The same thing works in sales. Believe it or not, I'm out there selling things now because I have a new company. The same thing works in sales. Listen to somebody, hear their goals, hear their challenges, echo back their own words at them, and then show how you fit their problem. Your close rate goes up. Because people don't like to say one thing and then act in a different way. It's very uncomfortable for people. Most people, politicians. Yeah. Don't forget the postmortem. So you need to consistently, you made the hire, you closed them. They started work. 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years. How are they doing? Did your interview process, was it predictable? You need to go back and measure. A lot of companies don't do that. The hire comes in and we just forget about it. They go to work and we're done. You know, a year out, were they a 3 out of 5? Are they a 4 out of 5? Are they a top performer? Go back and look at those interview notes. You should not throw those notes away. You should keep them. You should collect them from every interviewer and you should put them in the employee file so that later on, when they're performing well, they're performing average, or they're performing poorly. I don't care. You're going to look at it either way, but you should have a checkpoint where you go back and you open those notes from the interviewer and you say, here's what each interviewer saw, and here's how that person actually behaved. And that's going to tell you whether your interviewers were effective, whether your questions were effective, whether your process was effective. And you need to take break points to do that. So if you're in HR, I'm sorry, I just gave you more work to do. But you need to do that and see those trends. So I'm about done talking. So key takeaways, if you don't remember anything else, time is precious. Respect your candidate's time. That is the number one thing, especially when you are attracting candidates who are already employed. Respect their time. Nothing will turn them off faster than disrespecting their time. Hiring steps are not a process. A lot of people think they have a hiring process. They have hiring steps. Good questions are crafted. You don't make them up. You don't fly by the seat of your pants. It's very scientific. You need to continuously evaluate your process, the interviewers, and the candidates. A lot of people are only evaluating the candidates. That's not enough if you want to be a world-class hiring organization. And don't forget to craft messaging that deliberately sells candidates on your position. You should, over time, they do it in marketing, you have a customer profile. You should have multiple employee profiles of the types of people that succeed well in your organization, and then you tie your interview questions back to identify those types of people. You don't want groupthink. Not everybody needs to be the same, but you will find there are certain key characteristics that correlate very strongly with success in your organization. And a process should tease that out over time. You're not going to go back to your workplace and implement all this stuff and overnight transform your organization. This is something that takes time, it takes diligence, it takes dedication, it takes buy-in from your organization.